Hi folks, welcome to today's color process video. Right, to get right down to it, today's comic I'd originally intended on a more painterly kind of rendered look to things, like lots of shading, lots of nice lighting effects, and so on and so forth. However, I'll be frank, both for time reasons as well as aesthetic reasons, I decided to pare things way, way back and just render everything in flats. Now, I mean, obviously for time, like the time reasons thing, I realized looking at the comic and how much I would need to render with like the number of clouds that are in the different panels and like the complexity of the shapes of the clouds, especially in the first three panels. I I realized just how much time that would eat up to do. So I made the decision to just keep things flat because I felt that the line work it conveyed enough shape and depth in itself that I felt that trying to add to that with the color would risk muddying things. Whatever about like saving time. On top of that, like for aesthetic reasons, I felt that um, less was very much more here because like the line work does the majority of the grunt work here, and I didn't want to risk ruining that and making things kind of unreadable. And when it came to how I approached the the flat color scheme I went with, I found myself more and more desaturating the colors and lightening the colors. Like to begin with, the colors were going to be a lot more saturated and vibrant. However, there was something about the more washed out look to the colors that just struck a chord with me, and it felt right for this comic, especially the fact that it's not one of my typical haha funny or oh god weird kind of comics. Like it's one of my more kind of like, I don't know how you describe these ones, but one of my more sincere, down to earth comics. I don't know, but I just felt it was more in fitting with that kind of style of comic and the nature of the art. The fact that everything is rendered in these uh, very thin lines, um, and something about the look of the clouds. It almost gives me the impression of like something you'd see in like a European comic, and I felt that going with the kind of the washed out kind of flats would suit that. Like that's something you see in a lot of that type of work, especially like the work of Mobius. Like he, especially in his later work, he tended to use these very washed out kind of colors, and yeah, yeah. So this is just like a long-winded way of my saying that A, I'm lazy. B, uh, I just thought it looked nice. And on that latter note, that's really what it boils down to. Like, I wish I could say that my specific color choices here serve some kind of thematic purpose. Like the blue in the first panel, for example, it represents innocence or something like that. No, no, it's just I plopped colors down and I messed around with the sliders until I got a combination of colors that I felt just looked nice. Now, obviously, you can see here there's like red, green, and blue. You know, they just work. They just naturally work off one another really well. And then there's the yellow of the city scene, which kind of works as well. Um, and another thing I did was typically, well, not typically, all of my comics they tend to have uh, an overlay on top of the art, which just adds a touch of color on top of everything. And I tend to go with a purple overlay because I've mentioned before that purple overlays, they're almost like a cheat code in that, like, you actually, no, do you know what's the best way to put it? Purple overlay is the MSG of color work. You know, you put a sprinkle of MSG into food and suddenly it's magically delicious. That's just that's just how it works. So yeah, purple overlays are like that, but for color work. However, in this case, I decided to go in a slightly different direction where instead of going for the overlay blending option to the overlay panel, or layer, I should say, I went with pin light. And I set that pin light layer. Originally, it was purple, but it eventually ended up as blue. And I toyed around with it for a bit. Like, I added more saturation to it, I lightened it, I darkened it, and so on and so forth. However, in the end, what I went for was I made it very light and I desaturated it quite a bit. And what I found I got from the pin light layer, or having it set to pin light, was that it gave the line work in this piece and the spot blacks, like the bits where I filled in lots of black into the art. It gave that this like hazy kind of quality, almost like you're, well, seeing it through a haze, just seeing it through a haze, basically. And there was just something about that that clicked for me. It went so well, I found, with the washed out color work. And it wasn't even like an intentional thing. It was just me just experimenting, seeing what would happen if set the blending option of that layer to pin light rather than overlay. And yeah, it ended up just really tying everything together, I found. Um, and I mean, it's only a slight thing. It's not something I'd say a lot of people will notice, but I feel that if I didn't have that pin light layer on top of the art, it would still look nice, but it just adds that certain little something to the art that just really ties everything together, I find. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I can say about this one. So thank you very much. I can barely talk. Thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you at the next video. Take care.